Hare Krishna Maharaj. Um, Oftentimes it's easy to write, or not easy, but not too hard to write down goals, especially when there's a lot of motivation. But my material conditioning is very strong in the way that I currently am. It's hard to change that. So my question is, how do you develop the conviction to stick by that constitution that you have written on your wall, that this is how I'm going to be now, and that can be kind of an abrupt change, and maybe like 6 months later you're like, oh, I've deviated from this constitution. And so my question is, how do you develop conviction to stick by that constitution that you establish for yourself to overcome your conditioning?
Somebody look up the word conviction, and we'll see what we're trying to get.
Noun of action from past
Say it again so I can hear it go.
Noun of action from past participle stem of convincere, to overcome decisively.
To overcome decisively. So how can you develop that sense of overcoming decisively? Latin, obviously, right? Any other breakdown of the words? Huh?
Oh, I missed another one, sorry. It means mental state of being convinced or fully persuaded, from the 1690s, that of firm belief, a belief held as proven. And another breakdown of the word is come, which is an intensive prefix, and vincere is to conquer.
Convincere. To conquer?
Together. Like, calm means together. So
okay.
Convinces.
In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Goswami says, Siddhanta Bulya Chaitanya Kara Alash, Iha Hoite Krishna Loge Sudrid Manosh. Which means that to be very convinced about something, you have to evaluate it. Siddhanta is to be very clear. To have a siddhanta means to be very clear about a point. And you know what it is, and you also know what it isn't. It's very precise. And he says, Nakara alash, don't be lazy about deciding what's important to you, or what's... He's saying, if they're opposing thoughts, discuss them carefully and find out what's most important. And then, Iha hoite Krishna lage sudrid manash. The sudrid means that your mind becomes convinced. Manash means mind. When you've discussed it, when you've evaluated what's most important to you, then you can have a strong mind that can conquer over the tendency to do what's less important. And Prabhupada gives, Narada Muni gives an example of this in the 7th canto, when he's describing to Vasudeva, he's teaching Vasudeva, and he tells him as an example, he said, if you want to overcome a greed for wealth, then study wealth and see what a burden it is. You get money, you have to figure out where to park it so you don't get it all taken away. And it will get taken away one way or another. And he said, study the anomalies of wealth, and therefore you won't be greedy and think, now I have 1 million, but that's not enough, I got to have 5 million, and so on. It goes on forever. So it's in coming to a clear idea of consequences. And also just say, as a practice, writing goals is so powerful because you took the time to decide something that you want. Thoughts start in the lower chakra here. This is in the Bhāgavatam. And then they proceed up through these different energy centers, and they become more clear to us. They come as a subtle feeling, and then they come into the thought world. And when they come to here, there's a chakra here, that's when you voice it. So desires, subtle thoughts, and then they get voiced. And then you say it. And once you say it, especially if you put it on the internet, it's practically impossible to take back. What's happened is you've manifested something, an idea, a thought, and then it's come from subtle and then it becomes grossified. And when you write it down, when you sit down, this is no ordinary thing. To sit down and decide what's important to you, right, as a goal. And so what if you're still have proclivities in another direction? This will start pulling you. And there's an uncanny way in which, at least I can say, this is anecdotal from my life. I wrote, when I was a brahmachari for 13 years. And I started when I was 16, and I got married when I was 29. And when I was 29, I said, I got to decide how I'm going to organize my life. So I wrote down a whole list of goals. I hadn't seen my parents that much because I was mostly in ashrams and traveling around the world. I stopped in their house on my way to at their house on the way to India, and I had my goal list. It was just written on a piece of paper, and I accidentally left it there. I remember my father wrote me, and they were being protective of me because I'd never really interacted with the world that much. I just went right into the ashram. I was fully absorbed. And then I had all these, what looked to them, super ambitious goals, and they probably were. And they were trying to help me balance my life and saying, maybe these aren't, don't expect that much from the world. It may be too much what you've put here. And I remember several years later, after that, they gave me the paper back when I saw them the next time. But then when I went through the list some years later, I realized that I achieved everything on it. And I started thinking about how there's a subconscious force when you decide what you want and you write it down, it starts to manifest. And then even if you're going in a different direction, if you keep reminding yourself what your goals are, and that's one of the points I'll make about goal setting, is to keep it visible. In fact, right now, back at our home, I have been composing goals for the last several weeks, and I have them on a big Post-it board, those ones that you can pull off that people use at seminars. I have those on my wall. And recently when I was stewing about something, and then I looked at the goal sheet and I say, oh yeah, that's where I'm going, not here. And it pulls you along. So it's the first step. And unless you decide which way you're going, then your mind will just take you in any direction. Okay.